Johnny Nunset, that little boy, his mother, Susan, she started melting this wax image of Eustacia Vi because she thought that Eustacia Vi was a witch, and if she could melt somehow her idol, then she could get rid of Eustacia Vi's witchcraft. Hello and welcome back to NibblePop. Today I'm going to tell you the story of my most favorite novel by Hardy, The Return of the Native. In this video, I will take you through the major things that happen in the story, the plot progression through the 6 books of the novel, so that by the time you reach the end of this video, you will not just know about what happened in the story, but also about the different characters who play so important roles in the progress of the plot. I think summarizing The Return of the Native is a crime because it takes away so much of its flavor. But I'll still try to tell you what mattered to me most, so that if you feel interested, we can have a book by book reading as well in future. The whole novel is divided into 6 books. So we will go book by book. As the novel opens, we see Egdon Heath, an imaginary place, although not so imaginary in its landscape. Egdon Heath is like any English heathland, which is barren most of the year, which has no thick vegetation at all. Apart from an ancient landscape, there is a road built by the Romans which cuts across the heath. Here we have native people who celebrate native rituals. But this story is not about them. This story is about some sophisticated people who live on Egdon Heath. Let me talk to you about one of them first, Eustacia Vi. Eustacia Vi was born in a comparatively urban place, but she was orphaned and now she lives with her grandfather, Captain Vi, in Egdon Heath. She hates to live here and she always dreams of going to Paris. She does not have any fear of darkness and roams about at night. People think she is like a witch. Why does she roam about at night? One of the reasons is Damon Wildeve. Damon Wildeve is a tricky character. He is an engineer, but in Egdon Heath, he is an innkeeper. His house is an inn. He is a charming guy, but most of the time, his intentions are shady. Eustacia feels that Damon, being an outsider, can take her away from this dreadful place, away to Paris someday. But Damon is tangled with another woman, and well, they are planning to get married. She is Thomasine Yeobright. Damon arranges for a wedding in a church outside Egdon, but there are some license issues and that wedding is cancelled. Thomasine doesn't want to return with Damon now that they were not married. Diggory Wynne, who is a riddle man, he helps her come back to Egdon in his cart. What is a riddle man? A riddle man is a person who deals with dyes and colors, and they mark the sheep with this color, the red color, which is called the riddle, so that the owners can understand which sheep belongs to whom. And this profession is an age-old profession. And because of this profession, this person, Diggory Wynne's face, is kind of permanently dyed red because of overusing this chemical. Anyway, while they were returning through that road which runs across Egdon, Eustacia's grandfather saw them and he informed his granddaughter about the things that he saw, that the wedding between Thomasine and Wildeve was not through. When Thomasine was returning, she met her aunt Mrs. Yeobright, and she was very angry because of the whole fiasco. Not that Mrs. Yeobright liked Damon or anything. She never wanted Thomasin to marry Damon. She wanted Thomasin to marry her own son, Clym Yeobright. But since Thomasin wanted to marry Damon, she was okay with it. But now that this whole thing turned into a joke, she went with Thomasin to Wildiv's house to confront him. Eustacia, that night, after learning that Wildiv's wedding was cancelled, started to feel that maybe Wildiv deliberately did so because he actually loved Eustacia. So she wanted a one-to-one conversation with Damon, and what she did was she lit a bonfire at her backyard. And she took help from a little boy called Johnny Nonsuch. She told Johnny that wait for the sound of a frog jumping into the pond and then come and tell me about it. Back in Damon's house, these women, they were having an argument with Damon, but there was some sound outside. Some natives, they had come, they had thought that the wedding was a successful one and they had come to celebrate. Damon managed to escape the whole situation and he rushed off because he saw the signal from his window, the signal that Eustacia had lit a fire. This was earlier a kind of signal for him. This night, he saw Eustacia light a bonfire and he rushed in the middle of the night. And as he always did before, he dropped a stone into the pond, which Johnny thought was a frog, and Johnny came rushing to Eustacia saying that the frog had leapt into the pond, and Eustacia understood that Damon had come. She told Johnny to rush away because it was going to rain soon, and she gave him some little money. Johnny rushed away and Eustacia and Damon stood in front of each other. Both speak with passion and pride, and it was more like who owned whom in the relationship. More than love, it was about pride, it was about conquering. Anyway, Damon leaves. Things are kept a bit hanging, and when this whole thing is happening, we also get to know from the natives who are talking among themselves, and when natives talk, they gossip around a lot about rich people. So they start talking about the son of Mrs. Yeobright, who was employed in a very good position with a diamond merchant. He was going to return to Egdon Heath. Shortly before Christmas, Eustacia gets to know from Sam and Humphrey. They were talking. They were also two natives. They were talking with each other about Clym Yeobright, and Eustacia comes to know about Clym Yeobright's arrival, which is scheduled in some days. For Eustacia, this man became a symbol of her escape. Like, he started to think that this man is coming from Paris. So of course he's going to go back to Paris, and if I can somehow manage to hook on to him, then I can escape this heathland and I can go to Paris and I can live the way I want to live. Away from this loneliness, this darkness, this barren heathland. And she made a plan. Clym arrives in Egdon. It was Christmas, and there was this play which the natives were planning to perform at Yeobright's place. It was kind of a mumming play, and Eustacia had this teenage admirer whose name is Charlie, and she convinced Charlie that she would let Charlie hold her hand for 15 minutes if Charlie helped her act as a mummer wearing his costumes for one night at Clym's place. Charlie agrees. He loves Eustacia a lot. Eustacia plays the Turkish knight. She dresses up like a Turkish knight, goes on to do this performance, And she also breaks up with Wildeve, writing a letter which Diggory Ven, the riddle man, he delivers to Wildeve. Why is Diggory Ven so much interested? Well, because Diggory Ven was not always a riddle man. He was a dairyman's son and he loved Thomasin. But since there was this class divide, Thomasin's aunt, Mrs. Yobright, Clym's mother, she never wanted Thomasin to get married to Diggory Ven. So Diggory Ven became very depressed and he didn't want to show anybody his grief or even his face. So he chose this profession where his face would hide behind that deep red stain of riddle. All through this book, we see Riddleman repeatedly helping Thomasin, doing everything he can to make her get things she wants. And that is so unselfish. Like he always could have tried to create a divide between Thomasin and Wildeve, trying to barge in, but he didn't do that. He always tried to help her out the way she wanted him to. Well, after that breakup letter, Damon has no other option but Thomasin, and they get married eventually. There's a lot of drama before that, and Mrs. Yobright is not very happy with the match, as I told you, and she didn't even go to the wedding. But nonetheless, Thomasin married Wildeve. Clym plans to open a school in Egdon. He doesn't want to go back to Paris. At this juncture, Eustacia is so infatuated with Clym that she doesn't even notice what he actually wants. She somehow feels that he will take her away to Paris, no matter what he says now. She manages to entice him. They kiss in a full moon night, but it was also a night of eclipse. They get married. Mrs. Yobright was not happy at all. Everybody said Eustacia was a witch. How could she be happy with her? Clym and Eustacia, they go on to live in a house away from Mrs. Yobright. It was in a place called Alderworth. And Eustacia was still dreaming of going to Paris. The honeymoon phase was over soon. Clym started to have this terrible eye infection. He was almost going blind. Eustacia started to grow more and more depressed. Clym wanted her to shake off her depression, and so he wanted her to go to this festivity. Guess who she meets there? Damon Wildeve. They start dancing, old sparks renewed in Damon's heart. The riddleman comes to know this and secretly starts to watch Eustacia's house at night so that he can catch them if they meet. Why he does that? Because he wants to save Thomasin's marriage. And for that, he also goes to Mrs. Yobright and tells her that she should go and patch up with her son because he thinks that would make situations better. Mrs. Yobright decides to go and pay a visit to her son's house. A fatal visit. When Mrs. Yobright went to Clym's house, and she was a little distant from the actual house, she could see two male figures. One she could identify as her son, and that man was going at a higher speed. Clym, who was now almost blind, he couldn't read and write much. So what he used to do, he used to collect these sticks and furs so that that would help him pass time, and at the same time, he could somehow employ himself. So she saw Clym. He was entering his house from afar, and she also saw another male figure enter the house from the back door. She could not recognize the second male figure. This was Damon Wildeve. Damon Wildeve had felt that Diggory Ven, the riddle man, he was constantly watching them at night. So if I have to go to Eustacia, I'll have to go in the daytime. So he also goes in around the same time when Mrs. Yeobright was planning to pay a visit to her son. Now Mrs. Yeobright was an old lady and it took her some time to reach the doorstep. By that time, some things have started to happen. One, Eustacia was already talking with Damon at her backyard and Clym was fast asleep. So he had entered his house and he was so tired, he just dropped on his bed and he started sleeping and in fact dreaming about his mother. And Eustacia was talking to Damon in the backyard. So Mrs. Yeobright, she reaches the house, knocks on the door. When she knocks, at that time Clym was fast asleep, but he was dreaming, as I was telling you, of his mother. So in his dream, he just blurted out this word, mother. Eustacia from the backyard, she could understand that Mrs. Yeobright had come. But she thought that Clym was awake and on seeing his mother, he had said mother. She never understood that Clym was asleep. So she thought that Clym would open the door and she somehow asked Damon to leave. Damon leaves in haste and she comes back into the room. But by the time she comes back inside the room, Mrs. Yeobright had gone away. Because she thought my son and my daughter-in-law, they knew that I had been there, but they didn't open their door. It was a hot day and she had to walk back. But she couldn't make it. Almost midway, she somehow got bit by an adder, a poisonous snake, and she falls unconscious. Now, while this was happening outside Clym's house, a little distant from his house, Clym had woken up and he was dreaming about his mother. So he told Eustacia that he should go and meet his mother. He was feeling bad for her. Eustacia said, no, not today, later. But Clym said, no, I'll go today. And he decides to go and meet his mother. And on his journey, he came across the almost dead, unconscious body of his mother. He rushed to her at the last moments. The natives, they tried their native medicines, but she couldn't survive. Clym never knew then that his mother had already reached his house and she was returning from his house. He thought that my mother was coming to meet me, and while she was on her journey toward his house, the snake had bit her. This was what he thought, and he felt very bad that my mother was coming to meet me and she died. Anyway, meanwhile, Thomasin gave birth to a child. By a turn of events, Clym gets to know from that native boy, Johnny Nonsuch, who helped Eustacia build her fires. Johnny Nonsuch told Clym that his mother was actually going back from his house when she was killed by the snake. Clym felt so broken. He felt that my wife, she turned my mother away and then she had kept this a secret for so long. So it was a double breaking of trust for him. He goes back home, smashes his desk, he confronts his wife, there are heated words thrown at each other. Eustacia is so agitated too. Clym doesn't hit his wife, he's too sophisticated for that. So he smashes his desk and then there are these heated words exchanged and Eustacia rushes out of his house and they part ways. Eustacia goes to live with her grandfather again, Captain Y. When Eustacia first goes on to live with her grandfather, he was not in Egdon and he had these guns in his house. Eustacia even wanted to kill herself. She was so depressed with life. That teenage boy, Charlie, who had loved her so much, he became protective of her. He, removed those guns and she couldn't get them. And then by and by, Eustacia started to revive. Then, one day, a stone splashed into the pond. Damon, Wild Dave, comes to see her. Damon is a father now, and he has also come across some money. They plan to escape. At least Eustacia does so. Damon says he will help her reach Budmouth. From there, she can go to Paris. So he doesn't directly promise her anything or everything. But Eustacia has to escape. Then comes 6th of November. Clym writes a letter to Eustacia. He wants a reconciliation somehow because he thinks my mother is not there anymore. I love this woman so much. Maybe we can work around our differences. He gives the letter to Timothy Fairway, a native. Timothy does not deliver it directly to Eustacia. He gives it to her grandfather, who thinks that I'll give this letter to Eustacia in the morning when she wakes up because maybe it's night and she is asleep. Eustacia leaves her grandfather's house that midnight. It was a stormy night. And very close by, there is this scene where Johnny Nunset, that little boy, his mother, Susan, she started melting this wax image of Eustacia Vi because she thought that Eustacia Vi was a witch, and if she could melt somehow her idol, then she could get rid of Eustacia Vi's witchcraft, which she thought was making things worse for people of Egdon. On some other corner of Egdon Heath, Damon Wildeve left his wife and daughter on the same night. He left half his money for his wife and daughter, of course, before leaving, which is something exceptionally good, knowing what we know about Damon. Thomasin, she sees that her husband is missing and she feels that something must have gone wrong, and she always had suspicions. There were always these fights between the two. She comes to tell Clym about it. Clym, Diggory-Ven, because he is always a family friend for them, they all come and they meet Wildeve. They come across Wildeve when he was waiting for Eustacia. Before they started to have any conversation, they heard a splash of a body falling into water, the Shadwater Weir. Damon feared the worst. He wanted to have a new life with Eustacia, and he was so impulsive. He dived right in. And then Clym did too. Half-blind Clym, almost blind Clym. He jumped straight into the water. And right after that, Diggory, he wanted to rescue them, and he dived in. Eustacia and Damon Wildeve died that night, drowned together. Clym barely survived. The darkness is gone. Well, almost, because Clym never recovers his sight. But he ends up being what he has always wanted to be. He ends up being a preacher to the natives who listen to him, not so much for his wisdom, but for their love for Clym. The best part about this ending, Thomasin gets married to Diggory-Ven. And what happens to that teenage boy Charlie, who loved Eustacia so much? Clym gave him a memento, a lock from Eustacia's hair. Perhaps he thought Charlie would preserve Eustacia's memory in a far loving and far better way than he could. So all that remains of this most enigmatic, hedonistic, wild woman ever created in fiction is a single lock of hair. The native Clym is finally returned into the folds of nature, into the folds of Egdon, which he had always wanted. So, did you like this story? Do you have this novel in your syllabus? Write down in the comment section if you want me to make a more detailed, maybe book by book analysis focusing on important passages, reading along with you of this beautiful novel. If I get enough requests, I will definitely do this for you. Also tell me which character you like the most in this novel. In the description box, I have also given links to some of the answers which I have written on this book character of Eustacia, why, role of Egdon, Heath. You can always go through them. That's all for today. I hope to see you all very soon in my next video. Till then, stay subscribed, stay happy. This is Monami Mukherjee signing off. Bye-bye.